Well, happy Friday, happy March, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to MVP Office Hours. My name is Dale Ziegler, and with me are not only my usual partners in crime, Joy Shutters-Helbing and Squire Kirshner, but our esteemed fellow, I can't say former, but just she will always be emeritus, yes, emeritus, Jackie Trevieso. Welcome everybody. We're happy to see you. Squire, Joy, Jackie, say hi.
Hi, folks.
You can reach any of us on Twitter. Those are our individual handles. We also have our info site, which is under a tiny bit of reconstruction, and we'll probably touch on that here in the next couple of slides. But you can, all of our points of contact are in there if you need to reach out with any questions in between calls or any questions you may have. Over on the right is all of the events links. In the upper right is more of the bigger Salesforce and community-led events, which are still all virtual, but constantly updated. The third one here, the events and webinars calendar, is incredibly helpful as you may be going down your educational path. And if there was like a webinar on flow or something like that, not only does it include when those webinars are happening, but that's also where they post the recordings to them. So if you didn't get a chance to catch it live, you can go still get the link to the recording there and not miss a beat. So always be looking at these events if you're looking either for networking or anything educational, whatever it may be, release related, it's all out there. Here in the middle are the Dreamin' events, which if you're familiar with Dreamforce, the Dreamin' events are not they're not run by Salesforce, they're run by those of us in the community. So a much more intimate feel and a little bit more of a, no, really, this is how it works kind of feel. Those are all still virtual. I know we had some hope on some of the European ones being in person, but it looks like they have all flipped to virtual, which means they're open globally. You don't have to, travel internationally, have your passport ready, all that good stuff. So links to all of those events are here. And then all of Salesforce's events, which are also virtual, probably easy to anticipate. Dreamforce, I'm going to guess, will be virtual, TDX, all of those. But all the information will always be updated here at this shortened link. And then at a local level, myself, Squire, Joy, Jackie, I think we have a few others on here, Carlos, I believe as well. We all lead local user groups, which for the most part, I'm guessing are virtual. I know we are here in Kansas City and in a few other places, in several other places. But again, virtual opens the door to anybody can join, anybody can attend. I know Marty came to our meeting in Kansas City a few weeks ago, and it was awesome to have her there. But information about getting connected with those local groups, because there may be a speaker talking about a topic that you just absolutely want to see live and ask live Q&A, go get connected to them. Start with your local, branch outward from there. All the local stuff is here behind these links. Global MVP office hours. So some of the cleanup that we've had to do with our site. Right now, it is us in the United States. And then Carlos runs the MVP office hours in Portuguese. And Carlos, if you want to take a minute and talk about that, please.
Thank you, Vero. Yes, it's open to everybody. You don't need to speak Portuguese, and I translate. So we have people all over the world that do Portuguese, Spanish, English. If you have any other language, we try. And it happens on the last Thursday of the month at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And we are working like like this event, we're working on a new site, a new Zoom link or something like that. We're going to update that. We're going to talk to the folks here, but yeah, everybody's welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Momoa. And again, you can get all of that information at mvpofficehours.info. As he mentioned, his call runs last Thursday of the month. Ours runs normally the first and third Friday of the month. And, of course, we're going to change it up for April because of Good Friday and a 5-Friday month. But normally you can find us here on the first and third Fridays of the month. All the information you need is at mvpofficehours.info. So what are we doing here? This is a call where everyone participates. Anyone can ask questions. Anyone can answer the questions. Anyone can contribute their perspectives. You don't have to be an MVP to answer. Sometimes we'll have MVPs asking. This is an open forum. We ask that you just raise your hand in chat or unmute yourself when, if there's some dead air, or if you get called on because you said something in chat, I have a question, whatever. You can post links and resources in the Zoom chat, and we can bring those up obviously on screen share. We can also share them out afterwards. We just ask that through all of this, please mute yourself if you're not talking. We're up to 27 of us right now, and if we were all unmuted, we'd probably have a whole symphony of great background noises, but it would be kind of disruptive to the call. So just mute yourself if you're not talking, please and thank you. If you do unmute and you need to ask a question or you want to speak up, just introduce yourself. We're all friends here, so we just want to know who we're talking to. And again, you can share your screen, but we are recording. So first disclaimer, if you are not comfortable being recorded, if you're not allowed to be recorded, please hop off. We will post the recording to our YouTube channel sometime this evening or this weekend, so you can still, catch the recording. I'm trying to be better about time stamping what was talked about at what point in time. So, if there was a specific question, you could go straight to it, or you could just watch the whole recording. We'd love to have that too. We will share out that recording. We will share out the deck with any links discussed, all of that. So, but again, if you can't be recorded, sorry. We also ask that if you do share your screen, production needs to be your absolute last resort option. Show us a sandbox, show us a dev org, please just show us anything but production, just from a data security standpoint. This is being recorded, it's on the internet, and it's super duper hard to delete things from the internet. So just bear that in mind. For anything, for registering for future events, which we are going to be working on trying to get future events out there. We are kind of in between on the meeting platform right now. So we're going one meeting by meeting, trying to figure that out. Salesforce closed the Zoom account that they gave us at the end of February. So this meeting is on my 7 Summit Zoom account. It might be Squires, it might be Joy's, it might be 7 Summits again in 2 weeks, whatever. We'll have it figured out. We'll have a meeting. Right now, we're just going meeting by meeting. You can then also catch the recordings or follow us in the success community on Twitter and on YouTube. Those links are embedded here. They'll be in the deck when we share it out later. And of course, our favorite hashtags. So who are all of our MVPs on the call? And it's a trick question because you're all MVPs. But the Salesforce MVPs, who all do we have out there? Joy, Squire, Barb, Carlos, Jackie, Jake. We got a super good crew. So welcome everybody, one and all. We are all most definitely MVPs. So with that, we had one question posted in the success group, which I took offline this morning and helped somebody with. Their current situation was trying to take opportunity information upon closed won, linked, take any products from that opportunity, create a new order, copy those products over to the order, and it was through a series of 2 process builders and a flow. Why wasn't it working? Because of order of execution. Too many things staggered in an order that Salesforce is going to do what it wants to do in the order that it wants to do. And if you aren't familiar with, have it here, triggers and order of execution. If you've ever tried to get into building process builders, flows, any kind of automation, there is a very set order of execution of what Salesforce tries to do when you create or save a record or delete a record. And 2 process builders and a flow probably isn't going to make for a very good time. So where I directed this person was 1 process builder as the trigger, and then use a bigger flow to get control of what happens when. Because with 2 process builders, with some other creates and updates happening within the process builder outside of flow, anything really could happen at any time. So build the process builder as your trigger, build the flow to actually handle all the logic, and it was working. So that was our question that we had. Otherwise, we are looking at the chat thread or anybody to raise their hand. So Squire or Joy, do we have anybody lined up in chat first?
I didn't see anything.
Makes two of us.
Okay.
Andrea's got her hand up. What do you got, Andrea?
So this is a query. I'm curious on ideas across the group, how, if you see the situation, how we might want to tackle this. So we are going to be expanding. We have a new product that's coming out that's going to be sold essentially like a franchise situation where 6 different locations might use our software, but they could be contracted through like the franchise, like corporate office. There's different relationship structures where I was like, well, parent, child, like use the parent account. That's not always the case. And it's more like they'll be like cousins. So just kind of different ways to, other than maybe like just a different lookup field on the account or an additional lookup field, ways to consider that. But the other thing that comes into play is essentially along the lines of kind of like entitlements, where there's different service levels or different, who's the decision maker? Can the franchise make their own decision? Does it have to be at corporate? What information can we provide, or who gets support? All this kind of stuff. It's not fully fleshed out yet, clearly. So we're just in the early stages of this all. So I kind of wanted to get an idea of ways to kind of indicate this, the varying relationship types between corporate and individual franchises, and any kind of considerations that might need to be taken into account, if that made any sense.
It made a ton of sense, actually. Before I got into Salesforce, I worked for a trucking company that managed its accounts in an account system that was 9 hierarchy levels high. You had corporate at the top, and then level 2 was like different branches, 3, 4, 5, and then the lower you got down to the actual locations. But each branch was dictated by, like to your example, is this a franchisee versus was it an independently owned but still under the corporate umbrella? And as the branching went out, it was wide enough to actually be able to handle all the different concepts, or all the different types of locations and accounts, roll-ups and everything. And where that started with was having the conversation of, okay, what are all of the types of locations that we could have? What are the types of branches that we could have? Getting on a whiteboard or getting on a Visio or a Lucidchart and just mapping it out before you even begin to think about what the system needs to look like. Because way too often, companies turn on Salesforce and they just say, oh, we're going to do the account hierarchy. And then they get themselves in trouble, because then they start over flooding the pick list options or trying to create custom lookups or whatever. You may have a complex account hierarchy structure that does require some customization to it, but it all starts with some incredibly in-depth conversations on paper.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're telling them. Like we do, and that's came up with what I was like, we have to figure out what are all those, like what are the different permutations of what they might be. And so that's why I just wanted to kind of start getting as they figure that out, what might be ways to indicate and track and associate all of those.
And I don't know that the answer is a technical, tactical one. I think that's where with you, and I mean, you specifically with all, you have a ton of knowledge on how Salesforce could, should, and more importantly, should not work. It's you coming up with your own kind of microcosm instance or a POC of here's how Salesforce would handle it by best practices. Here's kind of what we feel like our company operates as. Here's where we could extend it some customization. You don't have to go too far out, to put that together. But while the business decision makers look inward to realize, okay, how do we actually operate? How should we operate? You can then meet them in the middle with what Salesforce can and cannot do, should and should not do. And then that's what starts to flush out requirements and solutioning and actually getting a sustainable and scalable solution.
Okay, sounds good.
In my opinion.
Question.
Oh
for
yeah,
you,
I mean,
Andrea.
I mean, everything is like, well, no, let's figure out the requirements first before we start, because they very much think way too far ahead. I mean, this might not even be where we need all of this stuff for, probably maybe not like fully need it for like a couple more years even. So.
But a couple of
Andrea.
years can be tomorrow before you know it.
Oh yeah.
Andrea, is a part of this looking at what I would call account hierarchy? Like this is a parent account and it has these subsidiary accounts that are child to it?
Yeah, so that's part of it, but it's
Part of
also,
it.
I think someone ran into an error where they said they could only have, I don't know if this is a thing or not, where you could only have like 50 child accounts on a single parent. I don't know if that's actually a limit, and so then they started like, well, now let's create like a middle account with like the regional or whatever, but then if it has to inherit things from the grandparent to the, like, I think they're just making things more complicated than they need to be.
Okay.
I've
I
never
would-
heard of a limit on child records. I mean, when you're querying, you can only go like 5 or 10 high on any object, but I've never heard a limit on the account hierarchy.
50 lookups, but I think like having, I don't know why, I don't know what error somebody ran into where they were trying to just like create a new account with that same account. Like, I don't know.
So-
That's what they're claiming, but I don't know if they actually.
No screenshot. It didn't happen. No.
I'm bringing that up, Andrea, because for a client about a year ago, I deployed iTools account hierarchy tool. And they had a lot of success with that. And the thing I loved about it is that you can almost have what I'll call hierarchy templates. So in other words, they were in the insurance business. So at one level of the organization, the hierarchy had to be what we all would agree is parent and child. But at another level in the organization, it had to be coded by this outside insurance vendor book. We call it the yellow book or the blue book or the red book or the green book. And so therefore it had to be a completely different set of codes. And the iTools account hierarchy tool allows you to keep them all at the same time. And you can even assign the hierarchies to a profile. And it doesn't have to be limited one hierarchy to the profile, but if you've got, let's say, a CFO and he only needs the one hierarchy, he can see the hierarchy. So obviously you're still early days in what the business needs, but consider that as you do your research.
Cool. Thank you.
And I'll just throw it there too. I like what Dale was saying. We had something similar for one of our financial divisions, and we ended up kind of implementing a contact role model, but at the account level, to be able to just add as many child accounts to a record as possible as you needed, and just defining their role. But the initial ask was that, until then you start like populating all these records and people start wondering why you can't build hierarchical reports or roll-ups or and so like we had a great solution for today's problem that 6 months later we had to scrap and start again. So I think Dale's right on the mark there.
Thank you.
All right, Jackie, you're up.
Hello, friends.
Hello.
This is going to be a really easy question. All the research that I have done, and Dale, can I go ahead and share my screen?
You sure can.
Because I want to make sure that everyone understands what's what. Share screen. La la la. It's a sing-songy kind of day. Okay, so all the research that I have done has said, nope, sorry, Charlie, you cannot do this. and I want to bounce it off this group. So we're looking at our product list. So we're going to select products to put it on our opportunity, right? I want to be able to, I'm being asked if we can default the sort view based on list price and it remain sticky, or it just remain the default for everybody. All the research that I've done and people that I've talked to keep telling me, no, it can't be done. Has anyone tried to do this?
I mean, I'm gonna guess you obviously could if you were playing with a normal list view. This is not a normal list view. This is, you know, one of Salesforce's great pre-baked list views that you have zero control over. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't want to say you have to go straight to development and override this with what used to be a visual force page, but I don't know.
Okay. I just want to make sure that someone doesn't know of a secret checkbox somewhere that I haven't yet checked.
It's
You
not,
can add fields to this list view.
You can, yep,
You're just unable to select the default sort. Is that
exactly. That's what I'm finding.
and it's
What
not
what
very
is
in
the
in
what is the
list view
sort?
defaults.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joy, go ahead.
It's all right. I was just asking, how does it sort by default?
Let's see. I'm gonna, because I just sorted based on list price.
Mhm.
I think it
let
was
me-
product name. When you pulled it up,
Yeah.
I think it was product name.
I think it is product name. Yep.
Appears that way, yeah.
Is that the first field in this list layout? So this is its own little layout, right?
Yes.
Is that the first field in the layout?
Yeah. The product name is, and I believe it has to. I
Okay,
believe
that's what I was
that it
wondering.
has
I
to
didn't
be
know if
that
it
one.
had to be the first one in the layout or not, or if you could put a different field in first.
I will
Yeah.
double check that.
You can't change this. It's not driven by the search layout default.
No, I think it's its own little mini layout. Is that right?
Yeah, the columns
products?
are driven by the search layout, or by the search layout.
So
But
what
I'll-
would happen if you put list price as your first column then?
I'm gonna try that because that's very creative. So I will try that, and I will get back with you in a few minutes and let y'all know.
And Jackie,
yeah.
that's not a related list, is it?
No,
Mhm.
it's the
It's a
search
search result.
It's the
Okay.
search results. Yeah.
Thanks.
That is very special to price books. I also wonder if there's any kind of configuration within price books.
Isn't there like a mini layout that gives you that option to rearrange that on products?
You might have to go to classic.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm gonna
Because of
check all the
course.
things that you guys just suggested and see if that takes me down the right path.
Yeah, there's a lookup dialog list view in Classic. It even allows you to pick it right from Lightning. It's like search layouts for Classic, and there's a lookup dialog that I bet you is what's controlling it.
Okay. So I'm gonna go play with that right now, and I'll get back with y'all.
I feel like
I'll let
there's
you
a
know.
solution here because I feel like I've done this in a past life, but I could be confused. So
Sweet. Well, I don't like taking no for an answer. That's why I came to y'all.
I'll just bring up a blast from the past. Sinbad played a genie in a movie sometime. We just can't
stop
find it on Google.
Stop it.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Oh my goodness. I don't
All
even know.
right.
Where are we at with questions? I don't know.
I don't know. It's Friday. Whatever.
No, not whatever.
Not whatever. No.
So here, I have a question, and you folks that have played with Flow more than twice can answer for me. So building a flow based on a record type, but the record type ID is available, but not the record type name for the criteria. But we all know that hard coding IDs is a bad idea, especially when you're starting to work in the sandbox. Recommendations. I can either create the resource, or I can maybe create a field on the opportunity that displays the record type name that I can use.
Hold on. If you have an ID, you have a name.
Not in my flow conditions. I can't select record type name. I can only select record type ID. And so I either have to create a resource maybe, or I have to find another way.
You get so record type is a very leverageable object in Flow. So if you get whatever, if it's opportunity, if it's count, if it's whatever custom object, get the record type ID then get from the record type object the name where that ID equals that ID. Because what that does is it keeps you from hard coding the ID. It makes it durable across sandboxes in production where the IDs could change. The developer name is never going to change, but it's just one more lookup to say if name is ABC, do the IDs align?
Okay,
If that makes sense.
it does. It does, because I was thinking I could just create like an opportunity field that said equals record type
don't,
name.
No.
Another
I was-
option, just because it's easier to see them and mess with them and even modify them, a metadata table of the record type by ID and by name description like value is useful because you can see them. You have to keep it up rather than just use what's in the system, but at least you can read them
How does that go from sandbox to production though?
perfectly. You can deploy metadata tables and the data themselves because they're
Because it's
considered
custom
metadata.
metadata.
Excellent.
I think so Squire, like, I think what is the line in the sand? So there's a couple of different perspectives that I'm going to try and ask this from. Probably sound like an absolute moron asking it, but you know what, I'm going to charge forward anyway. Why one and not the other? Because I guess like what I hear Joy saying is that she's going to run a flow transactionally where one record needs to equal one record type. When I hear custom metadata, I hear bigger sums of static data, bigger sums of static metadata. That is a lot. It's definitely great for heavier lifting like coding and bulk automation and things like that. But to your point, it also requires a little bit of upkeep. What would you, if you could pro con the two of them, what would you say?
So I think the underlying pro con that drives all of this conversation is the who's got to maintain it. So like as a consultant, where maybe you want to hand it off to a power user type admin who's going to continue to keep the tables up to date like any other data, then I think that's the help that you get. If it's always going to be maintained by a knowledgeable admin who's going to have access, then just do it the way you described it. I think the biggest message I would say is that keep in mind that effectively custom settings should not be used in instead use custom metadata, and that even if that's one record, that's okay. The value is still there. I think holistically, you and I grew up thinking that custom metadata meant like I need all the counties in the United States stored somewhere. So, but now I think you should just rely on metadata for anything that you need to wire together and be able to manage on a data level. So I think the end result is that the pro con really has to do with the maintenance and less about the one or the other. In my case, the reason I like it is because every once in a while we write that flow that says if X, if this record type, then give me this record type ID or vice versa, whatever it is. And then out of the blue, you need to add a second one. Well, now you either have to rewrite the whole flow to handle two variables, or you can, if you design ahead, you can just say, I just add a new record to the metadata table, and now it'll handle either of these. And you just keep moving. You just add data versus modify the process. So again, have to be planful, but I think there's good in both.
Gotcha. From a resource allocation standpoint, does one or the other have any more or less impact on, like, let's say in a flow, you only get the 150 or 200 polls or actions or whatever. Does custom metadata types alleviate any of those limitations? Or as you're trying to think big picture of what am I trying to accomplish, does one help you out more than the other?
Yeah, great question. I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but it makes me want to dig into it. If the flow is making a single record call, it shouldn't matter whether you're accessing a system table or a custom metadata table, but that's a bad assumption, and so I would dig into it. So why don't I take that as a to-do and get back to you?
Those kinds of things always fascinate me because you can definitely argue multiple schools of thought that like that's what the nerd in me loves to philosophize about. I think that's why I love being one of the co-hosts on here, is that it's an avenue to do that. Thank you for indulging my nerdiness, everybody.
We can do that. No problem.
Was there any other smart people that had thoughts, by the way? I didn't want to camp on that one. Anybody else have ideas?
Jake, not to put you on the spot, but I know that a lot of this stuff is definitely in your wheelhouse. What's your take?
Yeah, my approach is going to be a lot like yours, Dale. I prefer not to have additional maintenance because normally I hand things off, and admins normally, me being a consultant, normally typically the person that's taking over. You say you use the custom metadata table that look at you like your deer in the headlights, whereas you just can kind of explain this, and you go look at the record type in the flow, and if you have to make adjustments, this is where you go. It's a little bit easier for them to manage, and as long as you label things correctly in the flow, sometimes it's easier for them to pick up on what you're doing and move along.
Yeah.
And yeah, Square, I don't think there is a difference either if you're pulling from a metadata, custom metadata type or a system table. I think it does the same query.
I'm feeling pretty comfortable that you and I are on the same page, but I'm going to look.
Cool.
I think regardless of what you go with, I think it definitely paints the importance of documentation, not only from a technical standpoint, but from a process standpoint as well, where the two come together. I mean, especially I was a solo admin for 6 years, and this was my documentation. And I gave my 4 weeks notice, and I spent all 4 weeks trying to get as much out of here as I possibly could, not knowing who was even going to take it over. And I kind of had to walk away just saying, well, hope for the best, hope it doesn't die. That was my baby for 6 years. But in the immediate, documenting what you do is always going to be important. But then, Joy, if you're starting with one record type right now, and that's great for a year or so, and then you have to come back and introduce a second record type, and I'm not calling you out specifically, but you brought up the question. This is for everybody else. If you have, what's the business process? What's the technical process? And they start to come like this, pinpointing that point in the overall process of I'm querying for one record type here. You can then immediately get into the impact analysis of, I know I have to introduce a second record type. What does that do to everything downstream? What else do I need to know from upstream? You have it all right there, and it's essentially refactoring and continuing to keep a sustainable and scalable solution, not having a series of tactical band-aids, because it's those kinds of things without documentation that can lead orgs southward super fast. So I'll shut up now.
I might suggest as well that once you come up with the solution you want to do it consistently across your org. If you ever run into the same situation, make sure it's documented like Dale said. I totally agree. And then the next time you run into a similar situation, follow the same rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, for the developers on the call, because I feel like this might be more of a Devi thing, but I'm learning about custom labels. Talk to me about how custom labels potentially help accomplish some of those increasing requirements.
So I'll go back to my earlier statement. The way I understand it, labels and settings are both given way to metadata. They're definitely easier, and I'm not sure I agree with them being sunset, but it's a little bit of the same, right? So trying to remember my logic here, but a setting is effectively just a stored value that you can just access anytime you want, almost like a global variable, versus a setting being a singular metadata record versus a custom metadata table being lots of those. Am I doing that right? Now I have to look. It's been so long. But
if train A leaves Seattle at 9:30,
but I think I'm pretty sure label is the idea of like, I want to know what our tax ID is from code. So you just store it in a custom label and access it whenever you need it, and that way you don't have to hard code it or store it as a record. You've got a setting that you could go get every time you need it, or your conversion rate or something like that, versus the setting. I'm gonna do a quick lookup to verify that. Somebody else, feel free to fill in the gaps that I've left wide open. Silence. I stunned everybody.
Well, all of this is also my inner broadcast journalism major coming out of I don't think we have any questions in the chat, and we don't have hands raising, so I'm trying to avoid dead air. But I think it's all good stuff for us to all know.
Yeah.
And consider as development becomes more and more attainable for admins, these are the kinds of things to be thinking about.
I think Tom had a follow-up from our earlier conversation about order of execution, if you wanted to jump to that while I click away.
Sure.
I also have a question for if we have dead air, but it's not pressing.
Okay, it looks like Tom and then Todd. So Thomas, go for it. Or I can read it if you can't unmute. Based on number 6 in the list of execution order, if you populate a field via a trigger and you want that field to be part of the duplicate check, would it have to be a before trigger, or would this not work at all and the duplicate will not get detected? Ooh. That
I'm
sounds
sorry,
like
I finally got off mute.
You're good, you're good.
You.
I proved my literacy.
That's my question.
Am I literate? Yeah, I am. No, I'm kidding. No, I think that honestly, that feels like one of those where all the ingredients are here, but you kind of need a small flow chart to line out, okay, what do I need to have happen when in this transaction, and reconciling back to this to ultimately determine. Because that's a few different things going on there, looking for duplicate matches, a trigger, populating, updating, like that feels like something you got to draw out just to make absolutely sure.
You mean basically do a POC against it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless
Yeah,
anybody on the call has done that before. Yeah.
I would get it free before trying to create a trigger.
I mean, is anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm multitasking here, and I apologize. So the pop-up field by a trigger, and you want the field to be part of duplicate check, would it be before? So don't forget that step 14 reruns that whole sequence, right? So it goes, anything that's been updated with a before update or after update goes back through and checks validation rules, flows, duplicate rules, processes, and escalations. So I think you can, if you
I didn't read that far down.
Yeah. This is like, if everybody could get this tattooed on their forearm, they'd be better admins. Granted, it'd be weird, and I don't want to be held responsible for that, but this thing is like your best friend. So, and I would also offer, if anybody who's thinking about stepping into the architecture space or even power developer space, one of the best exercises, in my opinion, is if you just grab like a Visio or a Lucid chart or anything, and if you follow this and build your own chart and kind of like do that manual exercise of making it stick in your head and the flow, you're going to learn a lot, and it's going to really help stick. And you're going to see things like, oh, there's 2 wheels here, and oh, here's why it doesn't trigger a 3rd time. Like, really, it's an exercise in like unnecessariness, because it's already written page after page after page, but a lot of value there. So I think 14 in this current sequence answers your question. If you know when it's being updated, it should recheck its duplication rule, and then you'd be off and running.
Thank you.
You do bring up a really good point, though, Squire. I'm going to infer, based on what you said, that a visual like that does not exist in the public domain.
I don't think I've ever seen one.
That's kind of sad, because this, like, I think we can all read this top to bottom, but there's a lot of gaps that could be, not gaps, but gaps could be created in the process of just saying, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, da, 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 da. Well, then you get to 14, and what's not then included is number, 5? No, where's validation rules? Validation rules, flows, duplicate rules, processes, escalation rules are not run again. So you're going through 1 through 13, but you're not. So
sorry. And I just said it does. You're right. Yeah, it doesn't.
Well, no, but what I'm saying though is, like, this is not visually friendly.
Yeah.
And
can you guys share that link so we know what you're?
I can't see it. Are you saying it doesn't now?
Sorry,
I didn't read that far down.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
yeah,
that's okay.
So 14, Dale caught it. custom validations, flows, duplicate rules, processes, and escalation rules are not run again.
Okay.
And that's not entirely true either, because they can be rerun within themselves if you tell them to rerun, like recursion on process builders and stuff like that.
Right.
If you're going to be, you need to build your own proof of concept of that it's going to work and document it out, because there's a lot of variances that can occur, and single checkboxes on a workflow rule or on a process builder can totally change how the whole entire process works.
Mm-hmm.
Jay, can you speak more to how you make it fire again? I wasn't aware of that.
So like on a process builder, there's the on the setup in the very first module, you can tell it to do recursion. So if you're having updates, it will keep firing, I think, up to 7 times. So if you keep having updates happening, it will keep going in there as well. I don't know if that happens just within the one step or if it happens after everything else. That's why I said that you probably need to play with it, because I typically like to stick to only a couple of things running at once and not have triggers and flows and all those other things firing all in the same type of object, because that's just a headache waiting to happen. My rule of thumb is if you have one type of automation, stick with it on that object, and then it's easier to figure out what's going on with everything else.
And probably once you get into a trigger, stick with the trigger.
Yep. Sorry, that was my bird.
That's right.
That's okay.
I also offered one last reason to think about, like, kind of doing a little study session on this, is there are steps in here that I know my first 10 years of being an admin, I didn't even know what some of those things were. And so the exercise of, I'm going to make something up and say, executing entitlement rules as a box in my flow made me realize that it was time to read something else. So just another plug for doing that.
I do appreciate that this refers to record triggered flows, so we know they're updating the page.
All right, let's see. We have, I lost my chat box. There's Todd next.
All right. Joy's question made me think of something I ran into this week with flows. I had a flow that was triggered by Process Builder. A little bit of a change in requirement. We decided we needed to run it scheduled. So I put a scheduler in front of it and called it as a subflow. At that point, all of the chatter posts failed. So it ran fine. I could debug it just standing alone. Even when I debugged it, calling it from the scheduled flow, it fails. And support came back with the answer, I just need to hard code the chatter ID, the group ID. Apparently there is no way to look up a group ID when called from a scheduled flow. Just kind of an informational thing in case anyone else runs into it.
Really?
Yeah, you look perplexed, Dale. I actually have another area where I wrote a subflow to go get the group ID based on the name. So I have some other flows that I can do that with, and that way I don't have to hard code. And that one failed too when I inserted it into the old flow and called it from the scheduled flow.
So is it kind of like with record triggered flows, you can't fire subflows? Is it that scheduled flows can't do subflows either, or is it chatter specifically is the issue?
It's doing the subflows just fine, but it can't look up the chatter group ID based on the name, either through that subflow I had or through the one I'm calling.
And it was working when you had it firing with a process builder.
Worked perfectly. So my reply to support was, well, that's all well and good, but you've just increased my workload when I refresh a sandbox now, because I have to go touch this and change the ID for my sandbox. So they're checking. So if I get an update, I'll let you know.
I'm just going to add to our favorite hashtags here, because Salesforce. Okay.
When you ran the debugger, did you try passing the ID to like a different variable or anything like that? I've ran into issues like that, and I had to pass the ID to a variable, then use that variable in as my ID for the chatter post update.
No, I did not try passing that ID because I'd have to look it up some other way. The chatter only
Yeah,
occurs if
I know.
there's
Yeah, there's definitely a weird thing in there that if you try to pass in a what is it like? I've had that issue. You're not the only one, so don't feel bad. I had the same type of issue. I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. I may have ended up hard coding the ID because there wasn't a workaround at the time. But I wanted to say that might have worked, but I'm not sure now.
okay. I'll go back and I'll investigate that also.
Are you able to see what the flow thinks it's doing in the debug? Like it just does, it gives you an error or gives you null or?
It tells me to insert a valid, it's coming up as null. When it tries to look up the name through the post chatter, when it tries to take the name and convert it to an ID, it comes back and says everything is null. And even in the subflow where I'm actually calling a query on group based on the name, it comes back with null result, no record found, when it's called from the scheduled flow.
So,
But it does know the name as it enters. Sorry, you see that it knows the name that you're trying to find, but it doesn't return an ID, or it says there's no, like it doesn't even know that what the name is.
Nope, it knows the name, it just doesn't return anything. It's like that lookup just doesn't work right. The query doesn't work right when it tries to get the ID with the group name.
So I mean, this is out on help and training, schedule triggered flows considerations. So the view all data permission is required to activate an auto launched flow that has a trigger. Oh, so that's from a trigger. Never mind. Or unless that, does that mean it? So what ID is actually running this flow on a scheduled basis?
It would be the automated process.
And does that have, I'm assuming, view all data and API enabled and all the things?
I do not know because that is a system profile and you can't see anything. It doesn't even show up in the user list to look at.
Gotcha. So theoretically, chatter would be enabled on that profile, we'd hope.
We would hope.
Okay. There's no apex or anything like that in there as well.
Correct. There's nothing like
Okay.
that.
No pauses, like we're at a point in time, we're running the flow start to end. Okay. Are you using the $record global variable in there at all?
Trying to think of the flow. Yes.
Okay. So, yeah. So this
What would be random question? This community, is this a chatter group? Is this in a community or in your internal org?
Internal org. We're not running any communities.
Cool. So make sure, because there's weird things with that too.
Right.
I have a
I mean,
quick
this
question.
is, yeah.
So you said, did I hear you say that your scheduled flow calls a subflow?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry.
Oh, wait. Scheduled flow. Yes.
And
it is successfully calling the subflow. So scheduled flow can call a subflow, but a triggered flow cannot.
okay.
And
that's first path I went down.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I
is-
was just wondering if that might have been something that kind of tricky there.
No, I
And-
actually I see the subflow running in the debug log, but it
Okay.
just returns null.
Can you code it to not call a subflow and see if it works that way?
That's going to be my next step. I thought about that just before I came on to ask this question and see if it works without a subflow.
Well, because what else, is there anything else besides chatter running in the subflow?
No.
So it's
subflow just goes out and takes the group name and does a query on the group to pull back the ID. That's all it does.
How are you getting the group name to the subflow? Or to the
Group
to
name's
the-
actually
to the
hard-coded.
scheduled flow, I mean.
I've hard coded that in the call to the subflow because that won't
And-
change.
And again, the only net change in all of this is instead of a process builder triggering it, it's the scheduling.
Correct. That's why I found it so intriguing.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And even more so when support said hard code the ID. It's like, no, I don't wanna.
I think sometimes it would be kind of fun to invite Salesforce support to our office hours calls just to... You were gonna
That's a
do
good
what?
idea.
Okay.
Do we have anything left in the queue? Because I have one topic I want to throw out there before we run out of time.
Did Ernesto have a question?
Nesto had something.
He did. He did.
It was the pros and cons of Excel versus Salesforce, and he was being serious. He
Yep.
wanted to encourage us to understand that he's very serious, and it's serious because explaining it is hard when you're an avid fan of Salesforce, like most of us are here. Explaining the differences between having these things live in Excel versus Salesforce. So, does anyone want to take a run at this?
Reporting.
There's one.
Obviously a lot more flexible to slice and dice the data, but
More persistent. It's not locally saved.
Visibility, data quality.
Ernesto, do
Gee,
you
I
have
would've-
any
I would- I
specific
would've-
concerns?
I would have
Hi,
said that-
everyone. No, I was wondering if anyone has like something already prepared that I can maybe look or want to share. I have what I need. I'm creating a PowerPoint, which has all those few points that you already point out. I have all the benefits, but yeah, I mean, to me, it's probably more for those users, which in this case are way high up, when they come up and say, "Oh, I could just do this in Excel." Like, yes, of course you can, and my boss basically asked me to actually do this documentation. I thought it was joking at first, but I guess.
I mean,
In that case, I would add extendability. Because
yeah, okay.
as soon as you start
sure.
tracking data, one department wants to share it that you didn't foresee wanting to share it.
Yeah,
That's not easy to do in Excel, but
right.
by adding a custom object pretty much in the same day in Salesforce land, you have extended that capability rapidly.
Yeah.
And then security, being able to secure your data at different levels.
Yeah.
Visibility, only some people see some data.
I mean, I feel like, like everything we're saying goes into basically your organizational definition of why Salesforce, and then it just trickles down to every tangential app. So take a step back from Excel and just work with leadership to say, why did we spend money on Salesforce? And then you can answer every question for why not Word, why not Excel, why not Notepad, why not someone's posted notes on their desktop. All those things get answered.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
helps.
I may be hearing a different question. If somebody higher up says I can do that in Excel, that's a skill set question.
Training.
Those are difficult. Learning how
Well,
to work
that
in Salesforce is not all that easy.
Right.
Well, it's also training. Yes, it's also accessibility, because I mean, you got to do a couple of clicks to get into where Salesforce is, and higher ups, I mean, they're going to claim, well, I don't have time to click through. I just need it right now. Whereas Excel lives right there on your desktop. You get a file emailed to you, double click, boom, see what I need to see. But so, I mean, absolutely, it's extending the training upward, but it's one simple bullet point. As soon as data is detached from its source, it is no longer accurate. Even if it matches line for line, it is no longer accurate. Save as then becomes a super spreader event. Like,
right.
I mean, I'm
No,
Yeah.
that's a great analogy.
No, that yeah, thank you guys. That's pretty much it.
Good, good.
Thank you.
Square, it's 2:00, but we can chat if you like, and you're welcome to. You guys are welcome to stick around. But Dale, how are you on time?
I just have 2:30.
All right. So what do you got, Squire?
Hopefully easy question. We're implementing for a new business process, and the old process had a series of questions with answer fields that we need to put in Salesforce. The questions are like 200 characters long, so clearly they don't work as a label. My gut is that you're probably not going to report the question name if it's a sentence or multiple sentences. But I'm wondering if anybody's ever dealt with that, and what they did to effectively address, it's a compliance list, right? So are you sure that you haven't done the thing with the other stuff and didn't know about it? Yes or no, and you check yes, but you can't fit that in the label, and we don't want to have two fields, one with a default value and one with the answer. It's this weird round and round and round. So what have people done?
Use Excel. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Is that like a survey or a poll that you could?
It's actually a compliance checklist that's an internal process. So we have to be able to say we answered those questions in the data collection of Salesforce, but there's just not a good way. I mean, what I'm suggesting that we do is have a field called question 1 and answer 1, and then use a dynamic form and a label with the answer field right next to it. So you can see the question, you can see the answers. It stores as checkboxes or whatever, but it's just, when you look at it from a data perspective, it doesn't mean anything. So it's this weird round and round.
What about a custom question object?
Say more. So then the object would store
The question and response.
Okay.
You would have a. I'm with you. Like a custom object that would be the questions, and you'd have a list of, and each record would be a different question.
Okay.
And then
like a joiner or something to say, here's the answer for question 1 and table and the subtable to store all those answers. Is that what you're saying?
Either that, or you have the questions that you pull from, and each object can have question 1, question 2, all 10 questions, or maybe only 4 questions are relevant for that particular type of record, what you're working with for compliance. So
Sure.
you could make questions whether they would be required or not based upon another data attribute on your records, or just all 10 questions are required and you fill in the answers.
Another thing I was thinking is you could put them, like you could have the long name in a screen flow and then store them with a short name in a field.
That's where my head was originally at. It's just that from the outside looking in, if you don't know the flow,
right,
the reporting, if there even is reporting, that's the challenge that we're having. Is it need to be reported? Because then this is moot, right? But if you what's the answers to question 1, but that doesn't tell you what question 1 is.
right.
It just tells you the answers, right? So
yeah, I kind of, so I've done the custom object thing in the past, because when I was an admin, we would do surveys. We used click tools, and we would then map all the responses back into Salesforce, because I was the only one with click tools license, sales, support, whoever needed to see everything. So we had a little bit of a period of time where we would take the question and populate it into a text box, because to your point, the question is more than 80 characters long. So it doesn't fit as the label of a field. And then you just have to figure, like, you would make the page layout, the answers and the questions align. Another thing that I'm actually doing with a client right now that I don't know if it would be applicable or not is we're doing a product fulfillment process, where based on the product sold, there's a series of steps that based on the product that the fulfillment team is supposed to go out and accomplish and schedule these calls. And we have an object in the middle that is the actual milestones. And then we're using tasks as the to-dos. And then as the to-dos get done, the milestone is done. When milestones are done, the product's fulfilled. And then we're storing all of that in custom metadata types. And so if are these compliance questions always and forever going to be the same, or is there going to be any kind of variability based on the circumstance?
Yeah, so the initial answer to that is no, they're always been the same, but you know darn well they're not going to always be the same. So,
and so with the process that we're building, we have the flexibility to just use logic to say if the product is payroll, because it's a financial services company, if it's payroll, you're going to have these 8 milestones, and milestone 1 has 3 tasks and 2, like on down the line, whatever. And maybe you're not going down to the task level, but it still gives us that variability to say, we need to create a custom object record and populate these questions or capture these things. And you could put in your questions in the custom metadata type and then capture the answers and whatever. I don't know.
We were thinking about just using activities. Because you could also then assign them to people or show that they were done. But that it seemed initially I was like, that seems like unnecessary. But I mean, after you mentioned the child object, it's kind of the same idea. And then it goes back to the perpetuity thing, right? Like when the question changes, you just change the flow to create different activities to answer the questions, right?
Well, and also if you're talking compliance, how long do you need to keep these on file? Because if your activities archive after 18, 24 months are kind of hosed.
Yeah, we're in one of those orgs where we asked Salesforce to make it 5 years. So our activities never go away.
Gotcha.
Well, they do 5 years.
Well, and they're just not reportable. They're still there.
Yeah, you just got to do some legwork to get it. What about like are any of these ever going to require approvals? Like if I sold to the mafia.
They probably should, but we're trying to get them to just use it and not make it painful. So right now it's just a process.
I'm just wondering though, can you put an approval process on a task?
I don't believe so. I think it's its own monster.
And so does that potentially put you back on a custom object?
Yeah, maybe.
All right. If you did the custom object, you could do, and don't want to get complex here, but if you did 2 custom objects, one has questions, required questions for this compliance year, and the other one is responses. And the responses then get directly related to the original object. So that this year you might have 10 questions and you can say that they're all required. You might have to do a roll-up summary of some sort to see if you have any that aren't answered, but and then next year they might be different questions, but then you'll know based upon what was related to that original object, which questions were answered and what the responses were.
Yeah. I know a few years ago in a flow presentation, Mark Ross did kind of a survey thing through a flow where he was able to then actually sequence the order of the questions because that custom object was parented on itself. And so he was able to essentially weed through what's my parent, what's my child, from that child, what's its child, from that child, what's its child, if you ever needed any kind of variability or sequencing or anything like that.
Yeah, I like that too. All right. Something to talk through. Thank you.
Yeah. When in doubt, Excel.
Stop it.
Somebody put him on mute.
Yeah.
I'm the host.
Recorded.
You can't.
Ooh.
I gotta run, guys.
Thank
And
you.
I'm thinking, one day I used to have dreams in Excel because the grid was like burned into my retinas. Whew, those were the days. Those are the days before Salesforce.
Yeah. All right.
All right, friends, if that's all the questions, then we will see you all at a similar bat time on a similar bat channel, but maybe not the same.
Are AOL chat rooms still open? Maybe we try that. I don't know.
Oh, we could try Clubhouse. I don't know.
No, I thought that was audio only. And by invite, like, I mean, we'd all invite each other. I know that, but like somebody has to be Genesis on that, right?
We can figure that out, but I have been in there and I think you're right. I think it is all audio. And so screen sharing would be off of the table, which would make things a little bit more complex. Google Meets doesn't really give us the recording capabilities we need.
I mean, it's a thing. I'd say it's a good thing.
Well, and also like we tried Google Meets here in Kansas City, and I guess I can stop recording.
Yeah, we probably should.
Yeah. Before this.
Bye.